I'm Alvina, a 34-year-old stay-at-home mom. My family of 4 includes my husband Morris, our 2 daughters who are in elementary school, and we also live together with my in-laws on the same property, making us a household of 6. Before marriage, I worked a job with night shifts, but Morris suggested, "I'd rather you quit if it means we don't cross paths as much," so I chose to leave my job. Since then, I devoted my time to raising our children when they were young and worked part-time when things got a bit more manageable. I wasn't very keen on the idea of living with my in-laws. At the point of contemplating living together, I was still uncertain about what kind of people they were, regardless of how wonderful they might be. I believed that a daughter-in-law living with her in-laws could lead to stress. So I felt relieved when Morris assured me before our marriage that we wouldn't have to live with his parents. However, right after we got married, Morris brought up the subject of living with his parents, saying, "I'm worried about my parents. What about living on the same property? It's not like we will be living in the same house, right?" I was taken aback and protested, but Morris countered, "Do you dislike my parents that much? We will live on the same property but separately. I just want to be near in case something happens. If our situations were reversed, wouldn't you want to live with your parents?" I found myself unable to refute him. My parents were still fit and healthy, living with my brother and his wife, so we were not going to live with them. I think that's why Morris could say things like, "If the roles were reversed, I would live with them." While I was still undecided and had not given my approval, Morris told me after a while, "My parents have already started building a house on our property. We can't refuse now." And so, we were forced into living together. Although I was unhappy, I managed to negotiate one condition. We will not interfere with each other's lives. And so, our shared property living arrangement began. My in-laws adhered to our agreement of non-interference. We led separate lives in our respective homes, and I joined them for meals once or twice a week. The house they built on our property was beautiful. And I even began to think that it might be a lucky break for us since we would inherit it eventually. However, that was a big mistake. My mother-in-law slowly started breaking our initial agreement. At first, she would visit our house once or twice a week and ask for help with tasks that I felt were reasonable, such as, "My back hurts a little, can you carry this?" Or, "I'm not feeling well today, can you prepare dinner?" However, over time, she started making demands like, "Isn't breakfast ready yet?" and "Why hasn't our part of the house been cleaned?" as if it was a given that I would be doing all the housework. As a result, I ended up cooking all 3 meals and cleaning both houses. Morris didn't say anything about this. Only my father-in-law would say, "Sorry for always asking you to do this." Sometimes he would kindly offer me some snacks and say, "I know it's not much, but please have this." Not only did my mother-in-law make me do the housework, but she also started interfering with how we educated our children. She started saying things like, "They should take these lessons," or, "It's strange that your 2 girls don't help with housework. What did you give birth to 2 girls for?" Yet every time mother-in-law lashed out at me, father-in-law would come to my defense. "You remember we had agreed to manage our respective homes, right?" Father-in-law would chide mother-in-law, who would say, "Oh right, I forgot. I guess I'm feeling weak and unwell, so I might have leaned on you a bit too much. I'm sorry." And she would apologize, at least on the surface. But a few hours later, when father-in-law wasn't looking, the harassment would start again. Even when I tried to tell Morris that this wasn't what we had agreed on, he would just say, "Even if you made an agreement at first, we're family, aren't we? We should be flexible when times get tough. It's your fault for not handling it well." I spent my days filled with frustration, and then, suddenly, mother-in-law collapsed at home. We quickly called an ambulance, but mother-in-law passed away from a sudden seizure. I couldn't tell father-in-law or Morris, but part of me was relieved that the harassment would finally end. Despite our agreement to not interfere in each other's lives, father-in-law had always been kind to me, and I felt differently towards him. I did my best to take care of him and his needs. Father-in-law often thanked me, saying, "I'm sorry for breaking our agreement not to interfere. I just can't handle housework on my own. Thank you so much." Our daughters were very fond of their gentle grandfather, and we spent many peaceful days together. But sadly, this peace didn't last long. Just a few months after mother-in-law passed away, father-in-law suddenly collapsed too. Father-in-law survived, but he was bedridden and needed constant care. During a discussion about father-in-law's care, he mentioned wanting to go to a nursing home to avoid being a burden, but Morris stepped in. "Don't say things like that, Dad. Family should care for each other. Nursing homes are for when family absolutely can't. Alvina said she's okay with taking care of you," he said, completely taking me by surprise. I did love father-in-law. I wanted to do whatever I could to help him. Even if he went to a nursing home, I was planning to visit him frequently. But caring for him full-time at home was a different matter entirely. It was clear that Morris wouldn't help. As a stay-at-home mom with young kids to look after, taking care of father-in-law would be a significant challenge. But I couldn't express my reluctance in front of father-in-law, who was different from mother-in-law. I had no choice but to agree to his care. As expected, the caregiving was quite difficult. I needed to assist him with meals, bathroom visits, and bathing. Father-in-law was a robust, elderly man, and as a member of the opposite sex, we both felt uncomfortable at times. Every day, I'd assist with the kids' school preparations and breakfast, do housework during the day, care for the kids when they got home, and prepare dinner, all on top of caring for father-in-law. Every night before going to sleep, I'd think, I somehow made it through the day. Then I would just collapse into bed. Morris, instead of helping with father-in-law's care, started spending even less time at home, citing work as an excuse. He claimed to have overnight work and only came home about 2 to 3 times a week. Furthermore, because I never knew when he'd come back home, I often struggled to prepare dinner in time. On days when my body ached from the sheer exhaustion, I prepare something simple. But even then, Morris would rage, I'm working my tail off there, and this is the thanks I get? When I asked him for a little help around the house or with caring for his father, he retorted, You're a full-time homemaker, aren't you? Caring for my father is your job. I felt miserable every day. This distressing situation dragged on for 3 years. My 2 daughters grew older and began to help with housework and caring for their grandfather, which helped lighten the burden. Chantel pitched in every day helping with cooking and cleaning. Janie tenderly wiped her grandfather's back each day, asking, Does that feel good, Grandpa? I was truly grateful to have such kind daughters. One day, Morris left his mobile phone at home when he went to work. Despite knowing better, I couldn't resist the temptation to take a look inside his phone. The password was his birthday, so I could unlock it instantly. What I found inside was a succession of shocking revelations. Unbelievably, Morris had been having an affair since around the time I started caring for his father, and they even had a child together. From their text messages, it was clear that Morris was also supporting his mistress financially. Although he'd given me money for living expenses and said, I'll save the rest for our children's future, he hadn't saved a dime. The messages got worse. My kid's already in elementary school, so he's not cute anymore. And caring for the old man is a pain, but thank God for my idle wife. It's a waste of money to put him in a care facility, but having my wife do it is free. Gotta make use of free labor, right? LOL. He was ridiculing me and our children. Under normal circumstances, I should have kept my cool and stayed silent until I had definitive evidence, but I was so furious, I couldn't remain calm. As soon as Morris got out of the bath, I shoved his mobile phone in his face and demanded, What is this about? At first, Morris seemed a little taken aback, but he quickly regained his composure. You've lost your femininity since you had our kids, he said, scorn filling his words. You've stopped wearing makeup, and your outfits are all about comfort. Since you started breastfeeding our second child and falling asleep with your mouth open, I felt completely turned off. And when you began caring for my dad, you lost even more of your femininity. You're not even a middle-aged woman anymore, more like a middle-aged man. His cruel words tore at my heart. But he didn't stop there. You know, my girlfriend always wears makeup and takes care of her appearance, even after having a child, he continued, coldly asserting. I have no plans to divorce you for appearance's sake, but my love is for her and our child. I'm not sure who'll go first, but once my dad is gone and our kids are adults, I plan to kick you out and live in the house with her. And so he continued to spew words indicating he considered me nothing more than trash, even though he appeared to have some concern for the children. I couldn't hold back my tears any longer. I too want to dress up and put on proper makeup, but you didn't help with childcare or housework at all. Juggling unfamiliar childcare and trying to do housework perfectly, I had to do it frantically, even if it meant messing up my hair. If you wanted me to look beautiful, why didn't you help with housework, childcare, or even the elder care? And even without a payback, shouldn't a husband and a father naturally help out? I pleaded through my tears, but my words didn't resonate with Morris. That's not true. Look at other women. They stay beautiful while raising their kids. As I've told you many times, it's just that you're not efficient. You, a stay-at-home mom, have no right to argue with me, the one who's putting food on the table, he coldly retorted. If you have a complaint, you're free to divorce, you know? For a woman in her mid-30s like you, employment opportunities are limited, right? You think you can raise our 2 kids just because you'll get a bit of alimony and compensation from me? He sneered. I felt struck in the worst possible way, and I couldn't say anything in return. Thinking about the children, I felt I couldn't divorce. Seeing this, Morris said, You can't, can you? If you care about the kids, you'll take care of my father until the end. After that, you'll work as my housekeeper. But don't worry, when the kids grow up, they'll help you out. So you better treat them well. He then went into his room with a satisfied smirk. For a while, I was dumbfounded and remained in place. Somehow I managed to regain my sanity and went to attend to my father-in-law. I intended to act as usual, but it must have been clear something was wrong. My father-in-law asked, "Is something wrong?" I tried to brush it off, saying, "Nothing at all." I couldn't hold back my tears, and I ended up telling him everything. After hearing me out, he said, "Alvina, I have something to give you. Can you come back in a few hours?" I did as he asked, and when I went to him after a few hours, he handed me a piece of paper with someone's contact details and said, "Contact this person." He then added, "They know everything. I should be the one taking action, but with this body of mine." He smiled brightly. A few days later, Morris told me, "As I told you before, I will be on a business trip for a week from now. Well, I guess it's better for you too if we call it a business trip, right? I will enjoy the sightseeing, so I decided to take this opportunity to take action." And a week later, "Hey, what the hell is going on? I come home and everything is gone?" Morris was raging and half panicking when he called me. I replied, "Oh, my, how was your week-long affair trip? Did you enjoy it?" Morris shouted, "Hey, stop messing around. I'm asking what the hell is going on." I decided to explain to Morris. The contact that my father-in-law gave me was for a Mr. Quarry, an old friend of his and a well-known, large-scale landowner in the region. Apparently, Mr. Quarry had always coveted the land where my in-laws' house stood and had been trying to negotiate for it. However, my father-in-law would always refuse, saying, "I plan to leave it to my son." But after observing the behavior of his son Morris and hearing my story, he seemed to have decided that his son was a lost cause. We had known in advance that Morris was planning to take a week-long affair trip because he was openly defiant and didn't try to hide it at all. Before that week, I had a talk with Mr. Quarry and we arranged to sell the house and land. It was a piece of land that Mr. Quarry had wanted for quite some time, so he was willing to buy it at a price considerably higher than the market rate. And during that week, the house was demolished. My father-in-law had requested Mr. Quarry, "This might be a bit selfish, but given the circumstances, could you do the demolition during this period if you're planning to anyway?" So when Morris came back, all he found was an empty lot. And we're going to have a new house built with my money my father-in-law got from selling the old house and land. Upon hearing this, Morris tried to persuade me to return to him, saying, "But you're jobless, aren't you? Even if Dad builds a house, you can't expect to be supported for the rest of your life. What are you going to do without my income? It's going to be tough, right?" I replied, "Well, don't worry about that. I did have some concerns about that part, but my father-in-law and Mr. Quarry have done quite a bit. I got a job offer from a company run by an acquaintance who happens to be looking for employees." And then I asked him, "Morris, shouldn't you be worrying about yourself instead?" When Morris suspiciously asked, "What do you mean?" I told him, "The company where you are working now, you got it because the president is a friend of your father's. But now that he's deciding to cut ties with you, he's spoken to the president. Feel free to fire him if this work is poor and he's committing adultery." The president responded, "It was hard to say, but he's been acting like he can't be fired and causing trouble. Let's see what happens from tomorrow." All I heard from the other end of the line was a surprised, "What?" Then silence. He tried to excuse himself, saying, "Well, I mean, I might have said some things out of anger before, like I was going to leave you in the future, but come on, that can't be true. Don't take it seriously. We're family. We should stick together, right? Can't you mediate between me and Dad?" So I told him, my family now is my daughters and my father-in-law. Goodbye, and hung up the phone. There were numerous calls from Morris after that, but I ignored them all. Later on, my divorce from Morris was finalized. I claimed compensation from Morris and his mistress. As Morris hadn't tried to hide his affair at all, I had gathered plenty of evidence. All of this information I heard from various people, such as the president of Morris's company, who was a friend of my father-in-law. Although it seems like extramarital affair wouldn't have led to this firing, astonishingly, Morris was embezzling company funds to support his double life. Morris was not only fired from his job, but he's also being sued for damages. He lost his home and job and tried to move in with his mistress, only to be dumped when she realized he had no money. On top of all of this, he was ordered to pay child support. Now Morris is spending his days job hunting while working multiple part-time jobs to pay off his debts and child support. As for me, I plan to live with my daughters and my father-in-law in a fully leased house until I move into the house that my father-in-law is building for us. When father-in-law offered to build the house, he said, "I'm moving into a care facility. I want you and your daughters to live happily here, Alvina." I countered, "What are you talking about, Dad? We're family. Besides, it would make the girls sad. Let's live together." Hearing this, my daughters also took father-in-law's hand and said, "We want to live with Grandpa." With tears in his eyes, father-in-law thanked us. While the girls do help out, caring for him while working is indeed tough, so we are currently enjoying our life together as a family of 4 with the help of home assistance and day services. We can't wait to move into our new home as a family of 4.